Galactic terror ended the moment. Humanity unleashed a single warship. The galaxy had known peace for exactly 347 years. Not the kind of peace that came from understanding or cooperation, but the suffocating silence that followed when the Kethmori Empire decided which species lived and which turned to ash floating in the void. Ambassador Zara Chen stood in the observation deck of the diplomatic station orbiting Nexus Prime, watching the purple swirls of the nebula beyond. Her reflection stared back from the reinforced transparasteel, showing a woman in her 40s with graying hair pulled back severely and eyes that had seen too much. Behind her, the emergency session of the Galactic Council raged on, voices rising in 17 different languages as representatives from across known space argued about humanity's latest request. The request was simple. Humanity wanted to join the Galactic Defense Coalition. The response from the other species had been anything but simple. "The humans are primitives," hissed Council Speaker Vex Tai, his scaled head swaying as his forked tongue tasted the recycled air. "They have been spacefaring for barely 2 centuries. Their technology is crude, their understanding of galactic politics non-existent. What could they possibly contribute to our defenses?" Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. The Altarians nodded their crystalline heads, creating a sound like wind chimes in a storm. The gas-based Etherians pulsed with colors that even the translation matrix interpreted as condescending. The hulking granite giants remained silent, but their boulder-like faces showed clear dismissal. Zara had heard it all before. Every species in the galaxy looked at humanity and saw children playing with fire. They saw a race that had barely crawled out of their gravity well, still fighting wars among themselves, while others had achieved peace through conquest or submission centuries ago. They saw primitive fusion drives and kinetic weapons, while their own ships bent space and fired coherent energy beams. What they did not see was what humanity had learned in those 2 centuries of space travel. What they had built in the dark between the stars, away from prying eyes and condescending allies. The Kethmori had made sure of that ignorance. For 3.5 centuries, the Kethmori Empire had ruled the galaxy through a simple principle: overwhelming superiority. Their ships were the size of small moons, their weapons could crack planets, and their armor could withstand anything the combined fleets of dozens of species could throw at them. When a species submitted, they were allowed to exist under Kethmori protection. When they resisted, they became cautionary tales told in hushed whispers. The Empire's ships patrolled every major trade route, their dark hulls bristling with weapons that could reduce entire fleets to subatomic particles. No one challenged them anymore. No one dared. Except now, the Kethmori were coming again. Long-range sensors had detected massive ship movements in the outer rim. Entire battle fleets, each one capable of sterilizing a dozen worlds, were converging on the core systems. The pattern was familiar to any student of galactic history. The Kethmori were preparing for another conquest wave, one that would bring even more worlds under their iron grip. The Galactic Council's response was predictable: prepare to surrender whatever worlds the Empire demanded, hope the tribute would satisfy them, and pray they would return to their distant territories for another few centuries. It was the same strategy that had kept most species alive for hundreds of years. But humanity had a different idea. "Esteemed members of the Council," Zara said, her voice cutting through the babble of alien languages. The translation matrix carried her words to every species present, but she spoke slowly, clearly, making sure every nuance reached them. "We have listened to your concerns about humanity's readiness to join the coalition. We understand your reservations." Speaker Vex Tai's scaled lips curled into what might have been a smile if humans could recognize saurian expressions. "Then you will withdraw your application and return to your isolated systems where you belong. Yes? Leave the defense of civilization to those who understand the realities of galactic warfare." "No," Zara said simply. The word hung in the chamber like a physical presence. Several species began chittering or buzzing in alarm. The very concept of refusing a council suggestion bordered on blasphemy in their carefully ordered society. "Perhaps the human did not understand," offered Council Member Thys, her melodious Altarian voice ringing like crystal bells. "The Kethmori approach with 17 full battle groups. Our intelligence estimates place their combined firepower at approximately 47 teratons equivalent. No single species can stand against such might. Cooperation and coordination through existing structures is our only hope for minimal losses." "We understand perfectly," Zara replied, "which is why humanity formally requests permission to deploy one ship to assist in the defense of the core systems." The chamber erupted. Emergency translation protocols kicked in as 24 species tried to express variants of "Are you insane?" simultaneously. Speaker Vextai reared up to his full 3-meter height, his scales flushing deep crimson. "One ship!" he bellowed. "The arrogance of this species knows no bounds. They would send a single primitive vessel against the might of the Empire. This is not courage, Council members. This is suicide with delusions of grandeur." Zara waited for the chaos to subside. She had expected this reaction. Every simulation, every psychological profile, every cultural analysis had predicted exactly this response. The other species saw warfare as a matter of numbers and technology. Bigger ships, more powerful weapons, larger fleets. It was how galactic warfare had been conducted for millennia. It was not how humans fought wars. "The ship in question is the UES Prometheus," she continued once the chamber had quieted. "She has been under construction for the past 75 years in the Sol system. Her specifications have been classified. But I can assure the Council that she represents humanity's most advanced technology." 75 years? Speaker Vextai's laugh was like grinding metal. "Our construction yards can produce a dreadnought in 18 months. What manner of primitive shipbuilding requires 3/4 of a century?" That was exactly the question Zara had hoped he would ask. She touched the control pad at her wrist, and a holographic display materialized in the center of the chamber. It showed a ship, but calling it a ship was like calling a hurricane a light breeze. The UES Prometheus was massive, but not in the way that impressed other species. She was not the largest human ship. That distinction belonged to the agricultural vessels that fed the colonies. She was not the most heavily armed. The orbital defense platforms around Earth carried bigger guns. She was not even the fastest. Messenger ships could achieve higher speeds in hyperspace. What the Prometheus was something entirely different. "The specifications we can share show a vessel 800 meters in length with a crew complement of 1,200, Zara said, watching the reactions around the chamber. "Her primary armament consists of kinetic accelerators and directed energy weapons. Her defensive systems include adaptive armor plating and point defense networks." The hologram rotated slowly, showing the ship from every angle. To the alien observers, she looked almost primitive. Her hull was angular, brutal, built for function rather than the flowing curves preferred by most galactic civilizations. Her weapon ports were obvious, her engines crude-looking fusion torches rather than the elegant gravitic drives common to advanced species. "This is what humanity offers against the might of the Empire?" Council Member Thys's voice carried notes of genuine sadness. "A single ship, barely larger than a Kethmori escort? Honored human, your species' courage is noted in the record, but courage without wisdom is merely another word for extinction." "The Prometheus is not our largest ship," Zara admitted. "She is not our fastest or our newest, but she is our answer to the Kethmori threat." She paused, letting her next words carry the full weight of human conviction. "She is also all we will need." The silence that followed was complete. Every species in the chamber had stopped moving, stopped chittering, stopped pulsing with bioluminescent communication. Even the Etherians had ceased their constant color changes, their gaseous forms hanging motionless in their containment fields. It was Speaker Vextai who finally broke the silence. All you will need for what? To die gloriously? To provide a momentary distraction while the rest of us attempt a rational defense? To end the Kethemori Empire, Zara said quietly. The explosion of outrage that followed her words was so intense that the chamber's acoustic dampeners actually activated to prevent damage to sensitive alien hearing organs. Representatives leaped to their feet, appendages, or gas jets, all talking at once in a cacophony that the translation matrix could not even begin to parse. Through it all, Zara stood calmly at the central podium, waiting. Eventually, Council Speaker Vextai restored order through the simple expedient of activating his species' subsonic intimidation call. The bone-deep rumble that emerged from his throat was felt rather than heard, and it carried an instinctive message that predators throughout the galaxy recognized: be silent or be eaten. The human representative will explain this statement, he said, once quiet returned, because it sounds remarkably like a declaration of war against an empire that has ruled this galaxy since before your species discovered agriculture. Zara nodded. Not a declaration of war, a statement of fact. The Kethemori have terrorized this galaxy for centuries because no one has ever truly fought back. You have all chosen survival over resistance, accommodation over confrontation. It is a rational choice, given the apparent balance of power. She gestured to the hologram of the Prometheus, still rotating slowly in the chamber's center. But the balance of power is not what it appears to be. Humanity has spent the last 2 centuries learning something that the rest of the galaxy forgot long ago: how to fight wars, not just battles; how to think strategically, not just tactically; how to win, not just survive. Pretty words, Councilmember Thess observed. But the Kethemori have ships that dwarf entire fleets. Their weapons can shatter moons. Their armor has never been penetrated by any known technology. What does humanity possess that 18 different species, working together for 3 centuries, could not achieve? Zara smiled for the first time since entering the chamber. It was not a pleasant expression. We possess something the Kethemori have never encountered before, she said. Something they have no defense against because they have never needed one. Something that no species in this galaxy has ever truly wielded in warfare. She touched her wrist control again, and new data began flowing across the holographic display. Energy readings, structural analyses, weapons specifications, but all encrypted in human mathematical notation that would take the alien observers hours to decipher. "What is this?" Speaker Vextai demanded. "Hope," Zara replied, "and the means to deliver it." The council chamber fell silent again as representatives stared at the incomprehensible data streams flowing around the image of the Prometheus. None of them could read the specifications, but something in the human ambassador's tone had shifted the entire atmosphere of the room. For the first time in 3.5 centuries, someone was talking about fighting the Kethemori Empire, not to delay the inevitable, but to actually win. It should have been ridiculous. It should have been the desperate fantasy of a species too young to understand the realities of galactic power. It should have been easily dismissed by minds that had accepted the Empire's dominance as a law of nature. But something in Ambassador Zara Chen's voice, something in the way she stood at that podium, suggested that humanity knew something the rest of the galaxy did not. Something that might change everything. Captain Marcus Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the UES Prometheus, watching the tactical display with the calm expression of a man who had been preparing for this moment his entire life. Around him, his crew moved with the precise efficiency of a machine built for one purpose: war. The bridge was not like those found on other human ships, much less the elaborate command centers preferred by alien species. Everything was functional, stripped down, built for speed and reliability rather than comfort or aesthetics. The crew wore combat suits instead of dress uniforms, and every surface was covered with displays showing weapons status, shield generators, and the positions of the 17 Keth-Mori battle groups, now moving toward the core systems. "Captain," called Lieutenant Sarah Kim from the communication station, "we're receiving priority transmissions from the combined fleet. Admiral Thexvar of the Altarian Defense Force requests immediate coordinates for our planned formation position." Rodriguez almost smiled. The aliens still thought they were commanding this engagement, still believed that the Prometheus was just another ship in their defensive formation. They had spent the last 3 days since the Council vote positioning their ships according to millennia-old tactical doctrine: layered defensive spheres, overlapping fields of fire, coordinated shield networks. It was all very logical, very traditional, and completely useless against the Keth-Mori. "Send our compliments to Admiral Thexvar," Rodriguez replied. "Inform him that the Prometheus will not be joining the defensive formation." The bridge went quiet for a moment. Even his own crew, trained for this mission since childhood, seemed to feel the weight of what they were about to do. "Sir," said Commander Janet Walsh from the tactical station, "the combined fleet is taking position near the Helix Nebula. Defensive formation Sierra 7, standard anti-dreadnought configuration. They're expecting us to take the left flank, heavy cruiser role." "They can expect whatever they like," Rodriguez said. "Helm, set course for the Keth-Mori formation. Direct intercept." "Direct intercept, sir." The young officer at the helm, Ensign David Park, turned to stare at his captain. That would put us in contact with the enemy fleet 4 hours ahead of the defensive engagement." "Exactly." Rodriguez touched his command console, and the main display shifted to show the tactical situation. The combined fleet of 18 species was arranged in a complex defensive pattern near a nebula that would provide cover and limit sensor range. It was a good position to make the Keth-Mori pay for every system they conquered. It might even slow them down enough for negotiations to begin. The Keth-Mori formation, meanwhile, was a sight that had terrorized the galaxy for centuries. 17 battle groups, each consisting of a command dreadnought surrounded by escort vessels and support ships. The dreadnoughts alone massed 30 million tons each, their hulls bristling with weapons that could sterilize planets. Their escorts were larger than most species' flagships. The support vessels carried enough troops to occupy dozens of worlds simultaneously. It was the most powerful fleet ever assembled in galactic history. Commanded by War Prince Keth-Mor himself, the Emperor's own son, and greatest military mind the Empire had ever produced. And Captain Rodriguez was steering directly toward them with a single ship. "Captain," Commander Walsh said quietly, "are you absolutely certain about this? The math, even with everything we know about the Prometheus, the numbers don't—" "The numbers never do," Rodriguez replied. "That's why humans fight differently than everyone else in the galaxy, Janet. We don't win because we're stronger or faster or more advanced. We win because we're willing to do things others can't even imagine." He gestured toward the tactical display, where the red icons representing Keth-Mori ships showed their inexorable advance toward the core systems. "Every species in that defensive formation is fighting to survive today. They're thinking about acceptable losses, strategic withdrawals, negotiated surrenders. They're thinking like prey." The bridge crew listened intently. Most of them had never served on any ship other than the Prometheus, had never known any mission other than this one. They were humanity's answer to 3.5 centuries of galactic tyranny, and they had been trained from birth to think in ways that no other species could comprehend. "But we're not prey," Rodriguez continued. We're not fighting to survive today. We're fighting to make sure the Kethmori never threaten anyone again. We're fighting to win permanently. Contact in 3 hours, 57 minutes, reported the sensor officer. The Kethmori formation is maintaining standard approach vector. No indication they've detected us yet. That would change soon enough. The Prometheus was not a stealth ship in the traditional sense. She could not hide from sensors or mask her energy signature. But she could do something almost as valuable. She could be dismissed as irrelevant until it was too late. Rodriguez remembered the conversation he had had with Admiral Chen 3 days ago, just before departure from the Sol system. The Admiral had stood in the Prometheus's launch bay, surrounded by the controlled chaos of final preparations, and looked up at the ship that represented 75 years of humanity's most classified research. "Marcus," she had said, "I want you to understand something. When we designed the Prometheus, we made a choice. We could have built her to be impressive. We could have made her beautiful, or elegant, or obviously powerful. We could have created something that would make the other species respect us immediately." She had gestured toward the ship's angular utilitarian hull. "Instead, we built her to be underestimated. Every specification we've released is technically accurate, but carefully incomplete. Every system visible to external sensors appears primitive compared to galactic standards. Every aspect of her design suggests that humanity is exactly what the other species think we are. Newcomers playing with technology we don't fully understand." Rodriguez had nodded. He had been part of the design process from the beginning, had helped craft the careful deception that would allow humanity to deploy its true capabilities without triggering a preemptive strike from nervous allies or enemies. "The Kethmori will scan her when she enters weapons range," Admiral Chen had continued. "Their computers will analyze her apparent capabilities and classify her as a minor threat. They will assign appropriate resources to deal with her. Probably one of their escort vessels, perhaps 2 if they're feeling cautious. They will never imagine that a single human ship could pose any real danger to their formation." "And by the time they realize their mistake?" Rodriguez had asked. "By then, it will be over." Now, 3 days later, Rodriguez watched the countdown timer on his tactical display and felt the weight of humanity's hopes pressing down on his shoulders. Somewhere behind them, the combined fleet of 18 species was preparing for a desperate defense against overwhelming odds. Somewhere ahead, the most powerful war machine in galactic history was advancing with the confidence of predators who had never met effective resistance. And somewhere in between, the UES Prometheus flew alone through the darkness between stars, carrying weapons and technologies that no other species had ever imagined. "Captain," called Lieutenant Kim from communications, "we're receiving a transmission from the Kethmori flagship. Audio only. Standard diplomatic protocols." Rodriguez almost laughed. Even now, approaching contact with the most feared military force in the galaxy, the aliens insisted on following proper procedures. "Put it through." The voice that filled the bridge was deep, resonant, and carried the unmistakable authority of someone who had commanded fleets for centuries. War Prince Kethmor spoke in the ancient battle tongue of his species, but the translation matrix rendered his words in perfect English. "Unknown vessel approaching Imperial formation. You will identify yourself and state your intentions immediately. This is your only warning." Rodriguez nodded to Lieutenant Kim, who opened a return channel. "This is Captain Marcus Rodriguez of the United Earth ship Prometheus," he said, his voice carrying clearly across the vast distance between ships. "I am approaching your formation to deliver a message on behalf of humanity." There was a pause. Rodriguez could imagine the chaos on the Kethmori flagship as intelligence officers scrambled to analyze this unprecedented situation. A single ship approaching their battle formation voluntarily, requesting to communicate rather than fleeing or joining the defensive fleet. When War Prince Kethmor spoke again, his voice carried a note of something that might have been amusement. A message from humanity? How quaint. Very well, Primitive. Deliver your message. But do not test our patience further. Your presence here is an insult to the dignity of the Imperial fleet. The message is simple, Rodriguez replied. Humanity formally demands the immediate withdrawal of all Kethmori forces from this sector of the galaxy. You have exactly 1 hour to begin your retreat. The silence that followed was so complete that Rodriguez could hear the soft hum of the bridge's life support systems. His crew stared at him with expressions ranging from awe to terror. Even they, trained for this mission since childhood, seemed stunned by the audacity of what their captain had just done. When War Prince Kethmor spoke again, his voice was filled with something that might have been laughter if the Kethmori possessed anything resembling a sense of humor. A demand? A single ship crewed by primitives makes demands of the Imperial fleet? Captain Rodriguez, your species' ignorance is exceeded only by your arrogance. Perhaps you do not comprehend what you face. I comprehend perfectly, Rodriguez replied. 17 battle groups, approximately 800 ships total, commanded by War Prince Kethmor aboard the dreadnought Eternal Dominion. Your flagship alone masses 37 million tons and carries enough firepower to destroy everything in this system twice over. He paused, letting that sink in. Which is why I'm giving you an hour to leave. This time, the War Prince's response came immediately, his voice dripping with contempt. You will power down your weapons, surrender your vessel, and prepare to be boarded. Your ship will serve as an example to the other species of what happens when primitives attempt to threaten their betters. Your crew will be enslaved, your technology absorbed into the Empire. This is the only mercy you will receive. Counteroffer, Rodriguez said calmly. You have 59 minutes and 30 seconds to begin your withdrawal. After that, I will consider your presence in this system an act of war against humanity. An act of war? War Prince Kethmor's voice had shifted from amusement to genuine anger. Against humanity? Your entire species commands perhaps 200 ships. Your most powerful weapons are primitive fusion devices. Your armor cannot withstand our lightest escort's fire. What possible threat could you represent to the Imperial fleet? Rodriguez looked around his bridge, meeting the eyes of each crew member. They were young, most of them, barely out of their 20s, but they had trained their entire lives for this moment, and he could see the calm determination in their faces. They knew what the Prometheus was capable of. They knew what humanity had built in the darkness between stars, while the rest of the galaxy dismissed them as irrelevant newcomers. War Prince, he said, his voice carrying across the vast distance between ships. You're about to find out. The transmission cut off with an electronic snap. On the tactical display, the Kethmori formation continued its steady approach. 17 battle groups arranged in a pattern that had conquered dozens of species over the centuries. Contact in 43 minutes, reported the sensor officer. Kethmori ships are maintaining formation. No indication of weapons charging or defensive postures. Rodriguez nodded. The Kethmori were still treating this as a minor annoyance to be swatted aside by their escorts. They had no idea what was about to happen to them. All stations report readiness, he ordered. Weapon systems online and ready, reported Commander Walsh. All targeting computers synchronized, primary and secondary batteries charged to full capacity. Engineering reports all systems nominal, came the voice of Chief Engineer Stone over the intercom. Reactor operating at 23% capacity. Power available for full combat operations. Defensive systems active, reported the shield officer. Adaptive armor responding normally. Point defense networks online and tracking multiple targets. Helm ready for combat maneuvering, called Ensign Park from the navigation console. All thruster assemblies responding correctly. Rodriguez settled back in his command chair and watched the countdown timer on his tactical display. In less than an hour, the UES Prometheus would make contact with the most powerful military force in galactic history. In less than an hour, humanity would finally reveal what they had been building for 75 years in the secret shipyards of the Sol system. In less than an hour, the galaxy would learn why humans fought wars differently than anyone else. The moment War Prince Kethmore realized he had made a terrible mistake, the UES Prometheus was already 8,000 kilometers inside his formation's defensive perimeter. The realization began when his flagship's sensors registered energy readings that should have been impossible from such a small vessel. The Prometheus had appeared on their screens as exactly what she seemed, a primitive human ship with crude fusion engines and basic kinetic weapons. Her hull configuration suggested simple armor plating, her weapon ports indicated conventional projectile systems, and her power signature matched the output expected from human reactor technology, all of which was completely accurate and utterly irrelevant. "War Prince," his tactical officer called from across the command deck of the Eternal Dominion, "the human ship is exhibiting unusual energy patterns. Our computers are having difficulty analyzing their exact nature." Kethmore turned his massive head toward the displays showing the approaching human vessel. After 3 centuries of conquest, he had learned to trust his instincts when something felt wrong. And everything about this situation felt wrong. "Define unusual," he commanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had never lost a battle in 500 years of warfare. "The ship's reactor appears to be operating at minimal capacity, but we're detecting power routing patterns that don't match any known technology. Additionally, their hull configuration seems to be adaptive." "Adaptive how?" The tactical officer's scaled fingers danced over his control console, bringing up a detailed scan of the Prometheus. "The armor plating appears to be shifting at the molecular level. Our computers initially classified it as primitive metal composition, but deeper scans suggest some form of programmable matter." Kethmore studied the display with growing unease. In his 5 centuries of life, he had conquered 43 different species and absorbed their technologies into the Empire's vast arsenal. He had seen energy weapons that could crack moons, defensive systems that could withstand stellar radiation, ships that could phase between dimensions. But he had never seen anything that his instruments could not analyze and classify within minutes. "War Prince," another officer called from the communication station, "we're receiving transmissions from our escort vessels. The human ship is not responding to targeting systems as expected." "Explain." "Our escorts have been attempting to achieve target lock on the human vessel for the past 17 minutes. Each time they acquire lock, the target seems to shift. Our computers report successful locks, but when missiles are fired, they lose tracking almost immediately." Kethmore felt the first cold touch of something he had not experienced in centuries: uncertainty. The human ship continued its steady approach, making no aggressive moves, following no evasive maneuvers. She simply flew straight toward his formation as if 800 Kethmori vessels posed no threat whatsoever. "Range to target? 6,000 kilometers and closing. The human vessel is now within effective range of all escort weapons. Order the escorts to open fire. I want that ship destroyed immediately." What happened next would be discussed in military academies across the galaxy for the next 1,000 years, assuming any military academies survived what was about to unfold. The Kethmori escort vessels opened fire with weapons that had shattered fleets, coherent energy beams that could slice through battle armor like paper, particle cannons that could vaporize asteroids, guided missiles carrying antimatter warheads powerful enough to sterilize cities. For exactly 3.7 seconds, the space around the Prometheus lit up like a newborn star as more firepower than most species possessed in their entire navies focused on a single human ship. When the weapons fire ceased and the sensors cleared, the UES Prometheus was not only intact, but appeared completely undamaged. "Report!" War Prince Kethmore's voice carried a note of something that might have been concern. All weapons registered direct hits, his tactical officer replied, his voice uncertain. Energy discharge patterns confirm impact with the target vessel, but sensors show no damage to the human ship, no armor penetration, no energy bleed, no structural failure of any kind. On the main display, the Prometheus continued her steady approach, her hull gleaming unmarked in the light of distant stars. Whatever the humans had done to their ship, it had just shrugged off an attack that would have destroyed any other vessel in known space. "War Prince," the communications officer called urgently. "We're receiving a transmission from the human ship." Captain Rodriguez's voice filled the command deck of the Eternal Dominion, calm and conversational as if he were discussing the weather instead of addressing the most feared military commander in the galaxy. "War Prince Kethmore, this is your 30-minute warning. I note that your escorts have completed their weapons test. I hope the results were educational." The bridge fell silent. Every member of the command crew turned to stare at War Prince Kethmore, waiting for orders that would make sense of what they had just witnessed. A single human ship had absorbed the combined firepower of 23 escort vessels and emerged completely unharmed. "This is impossible," Kethmore said quietly. "No known technology can provide such defensive capability. Our weapons are based on Kethmori science developed over millennia. They represent the pinnacle of military engineering." "Perhaps," suggested his science officer hesitantly, "the humans have developed something unknown to our databases?" Kethmore considered this possibility. The Empire's intelligence networks spanned the galaxy, monitoring every species' technological development, ensuring that nothing dangerous could be created without their knowledge. The humans had been under observation since they first achieved interstellar flight 2 centuries ago. Every ship, every weapon, every defensive system had been cataloged and analyzed, all of which meant either his intelligence networks had failed catastrophically, or the humans had managed to develop revolutionary technology while hiding it from the most sophisticated surveillance apparatus in galactic history. "War Prince," the tactical officer called, "the human ship has just crossed the 4,000-kilometer threshold. At current velocity, she'll reach our flagship in approximately 12 minutes. All ships, concentrate fire on the human vessel. Full intensity, all weapons." What followed was the most intense barrage in the history of galactic warfare. 17 dreadnoughts and their escort fleets unleashed everything they had at a single target. The space around the Prometheus became a maelstrom of energy and destruction that registered on sensors thousands of light years away. The sheer volume of fire was enough to crack the crust of a small planet. The UES Prometheus flew through it all like it was a gentle summer rain. "War Prince," the tactical officer's voice was now openly shaken. "No effect. Repeat, no effect on target. All weapons impacts confirmed. No damage to enemy vessel." Kethmore stared at the display showing the human ship's continued approach. In his 5 centuries of military service, he had never encountered anything his weapons could not destroy. The very foundation of Kethmori power rested on their ability to deliver overwhelming firepower to any target in the galaxy. If that firepower was meaningless— "Communications, open a channel to the human ship." "Channel open, War Prince." "Captain Rodriguez," Kethmore said, his voice carefully controlled, "what manner of technology protects your vessel? No known defensive system can withstand such concentrated fire." Rodriguez's reply came immediately, and when he spoke, Kethmore could hear something in the human's voice that chilled him more than the sight of his weapons proving useless. It was not triumph or arrogance. It was pity. "War Prince, your technology is indeed impressive. Your weapons represent the pinnacle of conventional military engineering. Your ships are marvels of traditional spacecraft design. For 3.5 centuries, they have been more than sufficient to maintain your empire." A pause. "Unfortunately for you, human military doctrine abandoned conventional approaches approximately 75 years ago." "Explain." When humanity first encountered evidence of the Kethemori Empire, we faced a simple choice. We could follow the path taken by every other species. Build larger ships, more powerful weapons, stronger armor. We could engage in a traditional arms race and hope to eventually match your capabilities. Rodriguez's voice carried across the vast distance between ships, reaching not just the Eternal Dominion, but every vessel in the Kethemori formation. Or we could recognize that you had been perfecting conventional warfare for millennia, and that trying to beat you at your own game was futile. So we chose to change the game entirely. 2 minutes to contact, the tactical officer reported. The human ship is still approaching. No weapons signatures detected, but what? Sir, our sensors are beginning to detect massive energy buildups throughout the human vessel. Whatever they're planning to do, they're about to do it. War Prince Kethmor had commanded fleets for 5 centuries. He had conquered dozens of worlds and faced enemies wielding every conceivable form of military technology. He understood tactics, strategy, and the mathematics of warfare better than perhaps any being in the galaxy, which was why he realized in that moment that he was about to lose everything. All ships, he commanded, his voice carrying across the Imperial fleet. Emergency scatter, full retreat, maximum acceleration. But it was already too late. The UES Prometheus had been designed around a single, revolutionary concept that no other species had ever considered. What if warfare was not about destroying the enemy's ships, but about destroying their ability to wage war? The weapons that activated aboard the Prometheus were not guns or missiles or energy projectors. They were something far more dangerous. They were systems designed to rewrite the fundamental nature of matter itself within a specific area of space. The technology was based on principles that human scientists had discovered while studying the quantum mechanics of consciousness itself. If thought could influence reality at the quantum level, and if quantum effects could be amplified and directed through properly designed machinery, then it became possible to impose specific changes on the universe through the application of focused will and sufficient power. Humanity had spent 75 years learning how to weaponize physics itself. The effect began slowly, almost gently. Throughout the Kethemori formation, ships began reporting minor technical difficulties. Reactor efficiency dropped by fractions of a percent. Computer systems experienced brief glitches. Weapons targeting systems required recalibration. Within minutes, the minor difficulties became major problems. Reactor cores began operating below minimum stable thresholds. Computer networks crashed and refused to restart. Weapons systems locked up completely. Life support systems struggled to maintain proper atmospheric composition. Within an hour, the most powerful fleet in galactic history had been reduced to a collection of powerless hulks drifting through space, their crews trapped aboard ships that no longer functioned. The UES Prometheus, meanwhile, continued to operate perfectly, her systems unaffected by the field she was generating. The quantum manipulation technology that crippled every other vessel in the area had been designed specifically to leave human technology untouched. "War Prince Kethmor," Captain Rodriguez's voice carried clearly through the emergency communication systems that were among the few things still functioning aboard the Eternal Dominion. "This is your final warning. You have approximately 6 hours of life support remaining. I suggest you use that time to contact your Emperor and inform him that the Kethemori Empire is hereby dissolved." In the shocked silence that followed, Rodriguez continued. "Surrender now, and your crews will be rescued and returned to your home systems unharmed. Refuse, and you will die here. Just another collection of debris in the endless dark. The choice is yours, but choose quickly. I have 17 other species waiting to learn whether the galaxy's long nightmare is finally over." War Prince Kethmor, who had never lost a battle, who had conquered worlds and enslaved species, who had been the terror of the galaxy for 5 centuries, sat in his dead ship and contemplated the impossible. A single human vessel had just destroyed the most powerful fleet in history without firing a single shot, and somewhere in the distance, the combined fleet of 18 species was receiving a transmission from the UES Prometheus. "This is Captain Rodriguez. The Kethamori threat has been neutralized. You may stand down from defensive positions. The galaxy is free."